Good afternoon here from Palm Springs, California. Valerie Milano, the senior editor of Aspiring Magazine and also the Hollywood Times. And I'm so happy to have our guest here today. Please introduce yourself and thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. My name is Brian Knappenberger. I'm a documentary filmmaker, director. And our most recent project, we've done a lot of historical projects for Netflix, Turning Points, and other series, but most recent project is The American Experiment.
Yes, that's what we're going to be talking about. The Experiment is on Netflix. It started on June 24th. Brian, as America approaches its 250th anniversary, what felt urgent to you about revisiting the founding of the country right now?
Well, th this was, we're at a pretty remarkable moment when you really kind of think about it and you take a minute to kind of analyze it and and look back at the 250-year anniversary of the signing of this incredible document, the Declaration of Independence, which was organized by committee and was edited and eventually, of course, written by Thomas Jefferson. But it starts out with these incredible words. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And that starts effectively a 250-year and experiment in self-governance. Can a nation govern itself? Can a people um, can a people be governed by reflection and choice rather than by accident and force, as Hamilton would later put it. And so, as we're at this moment now, a lot of those basic founding principles seem to be challenged in all sorts of new ways. And it felt particularly urgent on a milestone like this to kind of go back to those basic principles and say, well, how are they doing right now?
As you said, the series does ask the question, the huge question, can a people govern themselves? When you began making the documentary, did you feel that question differently than when you finished it?
Yes, in a way I didn't anticipate. Um, I think a lot of times we have really we are at a very divisive moment right now. We are a very divided country, and it does seem like some of those basic ideas of how power should work in America that were created at the founding are being tested. It's hard to look at the front page of the New York Times without seeing the words constitutional crisis. I think we are in a moment that is particularly dangerous when it comes to these basic ideas of how power should work in America being challenged. The basic concepts are being challenged. New things like technology and social media and even maybe even AI might be challenging these things too. So, but in terms of what kind of surprised me, I there's something about history that makes you understand that we've been through difficult times before, and to go back to those moments in our history that have been trying or difficult, in which some of these values have been challenged, and to see that we've gotten through it before actually leaves you more optimistic. There is a weird notion sometimes floated by, well, particularly right now by Trump and J.D. Vance and others, that says that we shouldn't somehow look at the difficult parts of our history. That if when you look at history and the more challenging or moments where we have fallen from our own ideals, that makes you like or appreciate America less. I disagree. I don't think it could be more farther from the truth. I actually think when you look at history, most people that look at history in any real way come away with some optimism. It's been difficult before. It's difficult now, but we've managed to find ways to keep making it work. So surprisingly, I was more pessimistic before I started this, and I'm a little bit more optimistic now.
Okay. You bring together voices from across the political spectrum,
Yeah.
former vice presidents, members of Congress, historians, legal scholars, even tribal leaders and civic thinkers. How difficult was it to create a conversation that felt truly wide-ranging but still cohesive?
Well, this is something we set out to do in the beginning, is to try to really approach this with as much bipartisanship as possible. Actually, one way of looking at it is, what if we had a constitutional convention today? What kind of voices would be there? Whose voices should be there? And so that was not a perfect way of filtering who we talked to, but one way of thinking about it. But we're thinking about this sort of very deep divide we find ourselves in. And it's a divide that curiously the founders, they didn't anticipate partisanship directly, but George Washington in his farewell address talked about the dangers of extreme factionalism, which was their word for partisanship. And he believed that it would tear our country apart. That was his belief. His farewell address after two terms, stressed the importance of union and believed that if we separated ourselves and the things that would divide us would eventually tear apart the union, and that our strength is really in being united.
The founding story is often told in a very polished way, but your series also addresses the contradictions like slavery and liberty and power and representation. How did you balance the reverence for the founding documents with honesty about the failures built into the system?
Because there were failures and contradictions from the very beginning. And I think that if there's anything powerful and resilient about our system, it's that it can change, and that it set a very high bar and set these kind of lofty ideals. It took us a long time to um, to realize, and we certainly even now haven't fully lived up to them, I don't believe. So, you reconcile that by understanding the contradictions that were there at the beginning, and and it's as stark as it has ever been in our history. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the words "All men are created equal," his slave Robert Hemings was in the room with him. So there it is. It was the challenge and the experiment of America is to live up to some of those highest ideals. Can we get there? And so I don't think you can blink. I don't think you can be real about America and blink at the harder moments and the more difficult contradictions. I think that's part of who we are, and we have to know that and understand that and continue to drive towards something that is better, that bends towards, as Obama would always say, bends towards justice, but also that reaches for those ideals that we're capable of.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. One of the fascinating elements is the voice casting, and my friend Christine
Mm.
Cavalieri worked on casting these
Oh, cool. That's cool.
extraordinary voices.
Yeah.
People with backgrounds in service, education, and civil life, philanthropy, and history, rather than just a traditional voiceover actors. Why was that approach important to you?
Well, we so much of this story, as I think is clear to everybody, there's no archival footage of this period. So what, you have to tell this story with written word a lot of times. So letters that people, this is how we learn about what happened. People wrote each other letters, these long kind of letters that they knew might be a part of history, especially some of the kind of more prominent figures. Diaries that weren't from the more prominent figures, pieces of just writings, and just it's just all of these kind of our founding. We are created by words on paper. We're the only country ever that was like that in the history of the world up until that point. We weren't created by any religion or within any creed or any ethnicity. We're brought together by words. And so these words are important. The words written by these prominent figures, the words of the diaries of people of that period of time. And so to bring that alive, we had choices. You could hire famous people to do this, and we did actually. Martin Sheen is George Washington, but the vast majority of these voices we decided to cast with what we're calling ordinary, extraordinary Americans. We have a former astronaut in there. We have a former Paralympian in there. The people that you just mentioned. These are people that may not be household names, but but are people that are prominent and have done something kind of significant in our country and have are just really kind of active, I guess, citizens of America. And we felt like that was to put the words of our founding in the voices of ordinary Americans was a poignant point that would add to the series.
Thank you for that. Yeah, very important. And when you heard those voices reading the Declaration of Independence and the journals and letters and speeches, was there any moments that might have surprised you emotionally?
Well, I guess the short answer is almost all of them. I mean, some of them are famous, but then almost everything that you read does bring you back to that time frame, and to walk in the shoes, sometimes in the lack of shoes of some of the soldiers, to see things unfolding through their eyes. It does. What I guess what the most surprising thing is that it gives you a sense of how fragile all this was. This really could have gone any number of different ways, almost at any turn. There's just, it's not like there were a few close calls and our country could have been derailed. It's like they were all close calls. It could have happened at any time. And they didn't know what they were doing. They had beliefs. They were driven by all sorts of sometimes lofty ideals, sometimes selfish ideals, selfish motivations. But I think our country is built on a fragile set of circumstances that gave us something pretty special in the end that we've been trying to live up to ever since.
As you mentioned, Martin Sheen voiced George Washington alongside an incredible cast of the Civic Voices. What did you want the voice performances to add that images and expert interviews alone couldn't?
A sense of the citizenry and of our country, a sense of the people that are still fighting the good fight, that are still participating in a democracy, representative democracy. An idea that this isn't just the prominent people. This is the everyday people too that are waking up and believing in a system. Our system is still pretty fragile. There's some guardrails, and there's some rules, and there's a constitution, and it's all mapped out, but it really works because we believe in it. If we stop believing in it, then none of this matters. And so, there is a sense that everyday people from across the country doing extraordinary things can do extraordinary things. I mean, uh, that's who we are.
Mhm. The series includes people such as Al Gore, Mike Pence, Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, Kamala Harris, Stephen Breyer, and Nancy Pelosi, and many others. Was there a moment when you realized that even very different political figures were circling the same founding fears or ideals?
Yeah, people from very different parts of the political spectrum do seem to agree on some basics. I think that's probably most, if there's one point, it's probably most profoundly made by Mike Pence. I mean, look, these are people on extreme sides of the political spectrum. Certainly, there's a lot of people in there I would disagree with probably on a lot of policy issues and how what the right direction for our country might be. But this notion that there is something central in the Constitution and the basic kind of makeup of our country, I think was made probably most profoundly by Mike Pence. He talks about the day that he had to ratify the Electoral College vote against Trump that brought Biden into the White House. That landed on his shoulders. There were people outside on the lawn hanging him in effigy. There was a crowd that eventually, of course, broke into the building that day. And so when I asked him about that day, he said he was moved and he was sort of powerfully remembering Al Gore. I guess when Mike Pence was a first year congressman, that was the year 2000, where Al Gore had to do almost the same thing Al Gore was the presidential candidate at that point, but he was also the vice president. And he had to ratify the votes that took him out of office. Same situation, very not same, but similar to controversial election. A lot of people angry on all sides, but Al Gore made the choice to ratify those electoral college votes and to do what was in his constitutional duty. To have Mike Pence say he's powerfully moved by this figure on the other side of the political spectrum, and that was an inspiration to him, kind of says a lot about what's actually probably most important here.
Yeah, Brian, you've directed major historical and political documentaries before, including, like you said, the Turning Point series. How did the American experiment challenge you differently as a filmmaker?
Well, in a practical way, the lack of archival footage and looking for interesting ways to visualize and bring audiences into this environment and back into pull people back into this history. That for sure. And that was a kind of wonderful challenge. Just on a from purely filmmaking perspective. Um, but it's challenging to to strip away those kind of competing partisan uh, bickering and the heated rhetoric of the moment to just kind of strip that down to its basics. I think a lot of people are upset with institutions. I think they're disillusioned with how things have changed. So much power moving into the executive branch in particular, as away from Congress, where we have more control. And people are disillusioned across the board, and it's been like that for 10 or 15 years in an extreme way. And so to cut through that and to say, well, okay, maybe some of this is failing, maybe some of this isn't working, but what is working? I think that was the sort of challenge that we had. What is worth saving from this? Let's just think for a moment about what the original intention was. What's worth saving at this point? I think we are at an extreme moment right now. I think things are cracking and fracturing in all sorts of ways that will present us with challenges that we haven't faced before. And so what is that initial premise of the country? What is that thing that did get us to 250 years? What is that thing that got us that made us this phenomenally successful country? What is it that did that originally? It's probably worth toning down the heated rhetoric a little bit and just understanding what are the basics.
So much to talk about, but I know we're winding down here. Finally, after spending so much time inside the founding era and its echoes today, are you more worried about the American experiment or more hopeful?
I'm worried about it. I'm worried about it. I'm definitely worried about it, but I understand that that's actually a good thing. Um, that being worried about it and being concerned about it, and means you care about it, and that means you want to be active and you want to do things that might preserve what's valuable and fix what's broken. So I think it's a weird way of putting it, but like I'm worried about it, and that worry makes me optimistic. People are concerned about it, and I hope people continue to be concerned about it. And it doesn't take much of a glance through history to realize that we've always been concerned about it. I mean, Yuval Levin makes a kind of wonderful point in our documentary. He says that it's part of the American soul that we're continually believe that we are losing something valuable, and that we're having to constantly kind of every generation believes they've inherited something wonderful and they're about to lose it. But there is something about us that keeps us fighting. There is that worry keeps us going. If you look at the national anthem of England, right? It's God Save the King. If you look at the national anthem of France, it just tells you how great France is. If you look at the national anthem of the United States, it's about barely making it through one night. That's who we are. We are, we are constantly saving ourselves.
Mhm. Brian, thank you for helping us look at history, not as something frozen in a textbook, but as something still very much alive and apparently still arguing with us. Um, and thank you for being here with the Hollywood Times and for this project so we can continue to stay in tune and keep up the great work and keep us posted on your future endeavors.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you
Okay.
again.